Welcome everyone. Hi George.
Hey everyone, and George.
Everyone and George is here. Parshas Shlach can be found on page 798. He talks about a mission to Israel that fails. He talks about a group of people that are sent by a nation that did not have the faith in the authorities, in Moshe Rabbeinu and in the Almighty, that we are dealing here with a wonderful land, that challenges exist there, but you are a nation that's above nature, but rather they wanted to work with what's practical, and they needed some experts in the field who will give them a detailed plan of what they are able or able not to do, and the mission fails. So we have a devastating chapter here, because they come back from this mission, and for the next 40 years they are wandering in the desert. There's a lot of messages in this parsha that relates to attitude, relate to faith, relate to the love of Israel, relates to our strong link to this incredible land that is a gift from the Almighty. But I would like to focus today on three things, three separate insights, issues, thoughts, only three. And that's it. So you're going to have to remind me where we're holding. 1, 2, 3. The first one will relate to the concept of visiting graves. It is popular, very popular by some, that you go visit graves. Less popular by others, but nevertheless done. There is a minority that rejects the concept. They're on the losing end today, because it's a big thing to go ahead and go to graves. As my younger brother says, people take pictures by the graves. He calls it a gravy, right? So that's number one. Visiting graves, Jewish attitude towards visiting kvaros, kivrei avos, which is indeed significant when it's a relative we remember, we related to. I'm sure that all of us could agree that that's a very significant psychological event. The question is there a bigger picture than that or not? So that's number 2, kivrei avos. Number 2 is going to relate to the concept of a chazakah. In other words, when you go ahead and I want to transfer land to you, it technically becomes yours when you take hold of the land. You do a chazakah. So if I sell you land and you go ahead and put up a fence, or if you remove a fence, right? All those actions indicate that it's your land. You are treating it like an owner, and that is what technically transfers it into your domain, a chazakah. And the words of the Talmud, lech chazek v'kni, go ahead and do a chazakah, and then you shall acquire. So we're going to talk about the chazakah aspect that the Almighty wanted the people of Israel to do in the land of Israel. That would be number 2. Number 3 will be an insight from a 19th century rabbi. His name was Reb Tzadok HaKohen from Lublin. He had a non-Hasidic background, but he joined Hasidic movement and Hasidic thought. He made a tremendous contribution in that field. His insights are incredible, and I'm going to share with you an insight that perhaps we've addressed or touched upon it in the past, but I would like to share it with you in detail. So that's going to be number 3. So number 1, several years ago, maybe 20, 25 years ago, there was a group of people who flew into Bratislava to visit the gravesite of the Chatam Sofer. And this was, it was a big to-do. It wasn't as common today. They're advertising for tours right and left to go ahead and visit graves and have 5-star meals when you tour Europe. This is how it's advertised today. It's a big business. So this group of wonderful good Jews make their way to the Chatam Sofer, and they're praying by his grave. And then afterwards, some of them started writing kvitlach. Kvitlach, meaning they start writing messages on notes that just in case the Chatam Sofer, due to old age, has difficulty hearing, they write notes. And I'm being a little bit facetious here, but this is a tradition that exists by Chassidim, that you give a kvittel to the Rebbe, and the relationship the Rebbe has with his followers remains even after the passing of the Rebbe. So they started writing kvitlach. some of the people present got very upset and felt that this is absurd. You want to go ahead and do it to some Rebbe in the Ukraine or in Eastern Hungary, fine, but you don't do that for the Chatam Sofer. And others felt, why not? What's wrong? It is done, it's a minig Yisruel, and why not do so? Now it's interesting that this occurs specifically by the Chatam Sofer. That is because there's something very fascinating that occurred with his family. Chatam Sofer was not a Hasidic Jew at all. And he was very much, he didn't buy into this new thought, this new wave, and new insight. But due to the fact that he was technically, even though Bratislava is not in Hungary, but is in the Czech, in Slovakia. But it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And therefore his teachings spread eastward. In other words, the impact he had, his impact did not move too much to the west, because you're dealing there with Austria and Germany, in the middle of the 19th century that did not really follow his teachings, but it spread, and his children and his disciples all made their way into Hungarian communities, and as his teachings spread to the east, Hasidic thought and Hasidic presence was very strong in eastern Hungary. So therefore there was some kind of blend between the two. In other words, the followers of the Chatam Sofer and followers of Hasidic thought really came together, which created a unique challenge for those who tried to be a little bit of both. There is in the neighborhood of Katamon in Israel, there's the yeshiva. It's known as the Erloi Yeshiva. The Erloi Yeshiva is very interesting because when you see the students coming out, they wear what's very close to Hasidic garb. I don't know to what extent exactly. I'm not an expert in the field to tell you, from the hat or how it's twisted, to what extent they're Hasidic. But in general, for an outsider, it looks very Hasidic. But at the same time, when you walk inside, their nusach, their prayers, the nusach they follow is Ashkenaz, which is not common at all. But the Hasidim in general bought into the Nusach Sfard, which is more the mystical Nusach. So you see here that there is something unique about the Chatam Sofer, that he's a borderline or a seam authority. And therefore this clash occurs right by his grave, because you had those who were very traditional Chatam Sofer followers who will claim he doesn't buy into this nonsense. And then there are others that believe, what do you mean? It is something that is done by Hasidic thinkers. The Chatam Sofer's teachings are so much part of Hasidic thought because you have people among Hungarians who do. So the clash occurred there. So we're going to try to figure out how to relate to it, and specifically in this week's parasha, because as you know, one of the spies actually made a visit to Kivrei Avot, to a gravesite. So let's turn to the parasha. You know the parasha on page 798. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor shlach lecha anashim. Send people that are going to be for you. That's how it's read by some. And they should go ahead and spy out the land. And the list is given. There's a long list here. Two of the names we are familiar with because they are the two success stories that came back with a positive attitude. One is Hoshea bin Nun, who was called Yehoshua, who had an adjustment in his name because Moshe Rabbeinu felt that his personality of the willingness to accept. There are those people who are willing to accept what is taught by others. You have some cynical people who don't accept anything that they hear, and those people are very, very good if you place them among corrupt thinkers, because they're going to reject such thought. They're not going to be affected by those that surround them. If on the other hand you have this personality that whatever is told to you, due to your humility, you are willing to listen, you are an excellent candidate to be a disciple of a great man like Yehoshua bin Nun. He was an excellent candidate as the Talmid Muvak, as the disciple of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe says he accepts, but place this individual in this surrounding of spies, and Moshe Rabbeinu sensed the attitude is problematic, and have him spend 40 days. You think about missions to Israel, right? And you think about the fact that it's wonderful, but you spend a lot of time together in the bus, right? And you have to daven that it's with people you enjoy. People sometimes when they get onto a plane, they start looking already from before. If they know they're in 31B, so as they're getting closer, they're trying to spot out who's sitting at 31A, right? And they pray to the Almighty that it should not be someone that will create challenge for the next 11 hours. So imagine you're spending 40 days together. Hoshea bin Nun's personality would be such, the accepting fellow, one who would not argue but listen, problematic personality for such a journey, he needs some assistance and he gets a blessing from the master. Yehoshua is the adjustment. Kalev seemed not to need it. Kalev was different. Kalev, the other spy, who comes back with a positive report, seems to be a very strong personality. There's a rabbinic teaching that says that klavim azim, that dogs have azut. Azut is a personality of, it's a trait that relates to chutzpah a little bit. That means that you have to confront someone to their face and start complaining or saying something. You need to have courage in a personality. It could be used in a good way, that you have someone that is acting in a problematic way and you have the courage to face them and say, you're a major problem. You're not doing what you should be doing. It could be a personality that could be misused because you could have a student who approaches the teacher and becomes very popular among his friends because he's chutzpahdik to the teacher. That he could be facing the teacher, and usually when we're face to face with someone, there's a connection we have. If you have an azut, if you have that negative strength, the ability to ignore that you have just connected to a human being and yet share with him what you think about him or all kind of insights that are not complimentary, you have an azut. In our tradition, klavim have that azut. It seems to be that the keleb, no expert in the field of dogs, but it seems to be that their heart, they're emotional beings that can connect to their master, but you can't always judge them by the face. This is what we are told, the chveis nish. There's even one of the rabbinic authorities says that a keleb, any of you have some background? You grew up with chickens, I know, but a few dogs as well. Okay. So someone had to run around, get the chickens back into the coop or something. So, retrievers. Now, so the kelev, one of the rabbinic authorities right, is kulo lev. Kelev, kulo lev. In other words, there's intensity in his heart, but you don't always know what's happening in the heart. And Kalev, perhaps that's why he has this fascinating name, which did not become top 10, right? I haven't been by a bris yet, where they say that they're going to be naming him Kalev. Like in Israelis, as you mentioned, they have creativity with names, right? I even heard of a Nimrod. If I'm not mistaken, there's a representative from the state of Israel now, right? That is here. I don't know his exact position, but he's called Nimrod. Just be careful with that name. But the reality is Kalev did not gain popularity, but it seems to be he had courage. He had azut to go ahead and confront, to deal with for 40 days with these problematic people due to their attitude, and yet he managed. So what does he do? Now, when Moshe Rabbeinu in verse 18 tells them, listen, go ahead, see the land. Ureitem et haaretz mahi. What is it? Veta'am, and remember, you want to plan for battle, so you have to assess the people, their courage and their attitudes. Hayoshev alea, hachazaku, harapeh, hame'atu imrav. Are they weak? They strong, numerous? Uma haaretz asher hu yoshev ba. Tell me a little bit about the land. Hatovahi, is it a good land? Imra'ah, perhaps not. Tell me a little bit about the cities. Are they fortified or are they open? In verse 20, tell me a little bit about the land. Uma haaretz hashmenahi imraza, fertile or lean. Hayesh ba'etz im ayin. Are there trees there? And then, after he tells them what to keep their eyes open for, he tells them, and these are key words here, Vehit chazaktem. You should strengthen yourselves. Ulekachtem mi priya aretz. Bring back some of the fruit of the land. And therefore, we have the well-known emblem of Misrad HaTayarut, of the two spies coming back with a big cluster of grapes. It's a problematic emblem because they were the worst tourists to the state of Israel, period, throughout history. Because after they returned, there was no tourism to Israel for close to 40 years. And I don't think Misrad HaTayarut wants that. But they come back due to the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu tells them to bring fruit. Now, we'll see soon, the word he tells them to bring back the fruit is v'itchazaktem. So you could explain it as, hey, you're in a foreign land. To go ahead and start removing fruit from that land, that could be a problem, right? You ever been in Pearson and tried to transfer an apple into the United States of America, right? You might get weapons past the border and drugs, but an apple, God forbid, you're going to be, you're going to be put in the back room and you're going to be asked all kind of incredible questions due to the great danger of the apple. But obviously, there's more here. Vehit chazaktem. You should do some kind of chazakah, meaning Moshe Rabbeinu wants something from them, which we'll see soon, and we'll address it very well. So now, they make their way to the land of Israel, but verse 22 is the one we're going to focus on. Vaya'alu b'negev. So they begin their journey, they ascend in the south, they're making their way, and what's the first city, if you're in the Negev, what's the first city you're going to reach? You're going to reach Vayavo ad Chevron. And he reaches Vayavo, and the singular, he makes his way to Chevron. Vayavo, not Vayavo, but Vayavo. So some would say, listen, up until then they were getting along as one unit, but something occurs there. The rabbis have a tradition that as they are passing Chevron, one of them has a desire to make his way into Chevron. Others do not see a purpose. The one was Kalev ben Yefuneh, one of the good spies. He makes his way into Chevron according to rabbinic tradition. Halach sham v'nishtateach al kivrei avot. He made his way to pray by the grave of the patriarchs and the matriarchs in Hebron. So this is the source for this concept of visiting a grave. And we are told in this verse that you should know in Hebron, this is no easy city because there were some giants there. And there was Visham Achiman, Sheshai, and Talmai. There are midrashim that tell us that Achiman, when you would look at Achiman, you would cry out to the Almighty and say, Me'ain, a little bit of a play with the word, Achiman, like Me'ain, from where Me'ain Yavo Ezri. Who's going to help me again? This Superman. Meaning this was the city that scared the spies, that they're dealing here with some serious warriors. Achiman, Ma'ain Yavo Ezri. Sheshai is like a guy that's made out of marble. Right? This is not a flesh man. This is like a stone character. Talmai, the challenges are going to be like tlamim and tlamim, like rows upon rows. Like when you plow a field, there are rows that are created. They felt that the challenges to conquer this land are not going to be just there in the beginning, but it's going to be challenge after challenge, like tlamim. So the rabbis read into this verse that this is a verse that is quite presenting a clear idea that you saw Hebron and you saw the individuals that live there, you recognize that conquering this land, at least on paper, not an easy task. But the Torah tells us you should know Hebron, Sheva Shanim Nivneta Lifnei Tzoan Mitzrayim. You should know Hebron was built 7 years before the city of Tzoan. Now, a careful reading of the verse would indicate that we're not just giving here a historical, trivial piece of information, but rather the Chevron. In other words, if I want to say that a city was built before another city, I would write it. The Chevron nivneta sheva shanim lifnei Tzoan. And Hebron was built, but the verse doesn't put it that way. The verse says the Chevron, and Hebron was sheva shanim nivneta. It was built for 7 years, meaning this was a city that was incredible. It seems to be indicating that, remember, there's a lot of good in the land, and it's even better than the most magnificent places you remember in Egypt. A good attitude towards the state of Israel is, or the land of Israel is, that when you go ahead and if you visit Israel after visiting California, that you go ahead and say, yes, we were in California and we tasted the wines there, and we were there at a restaurant and we saw the coast and it was magnificent, But Eretz Yisrael is even better than that. It's 7 times better. That's the attitude, and this is what the Almighty wants us to do, that when you see those challenges, remember how wonderful the land is, and it was given to us. Now, there is, among Ashkenazi authorities, one of the most significant ones in the halachic realm, that so many of our minhagim are based on him, was Rabbi Yaakov Weil, the Maharil. Maharil talks about people visiting cemeteries and graves. And he warns us, Al Yasim Magamato Neged Hametim, that when you go ahead and you go to a Kever Avos, a parent's burial site, or if it could be somewhere in Eretz Yisrael that you go ahead and visit, do not pray to the relative. Do not pray to the tzaddik that's buried there. But rather what you do is that you turn to the Almighty and you say that in the merit of the person, that is buried here, please heed my prayers. This is what we are told. This is the pure old Ashkenazi tradition, pre-Hasidic. Now, obviously you do know that if you have some Hasidic background, or if you've heard that they turn to the person as a gebetin, as someone you are requesting from them. And the attitude, gebeten.
Sei get a beter.
Gita bete. Okay, so what are we asking for really? Listen, this is mentioned, by the way, that I have difficulties. I'm sharing them with you, right? And if you, due to the fact that you have some kind of connections up there, do me a favor, turn to the Almighty for some assistance. This is how it's structured. So there are different schools. There are different people that have different attitudes. Sometimes emotionally you feel driven to a specific direction. But the most important aspect of visiting a kever is to walk away with a message. In other words, true. If I could open up mystical text right now, and I could share with you the fact that every single neshama we have has 3 parts. That our neshama has what's known as a neshama, a ruach, and a nefesh. And the mystical text tells us that after a person departs, the neshama goes up into the spiritual realm, but the nefesh still remains here. And the ruach, which is in between, goes back and forth. This is, if you understand this, I'm very impressed, because I don't. I could say it over. I don't really understand what it means. What it seems to indicate was that there are indeed traditions that there's something there. That the person, there's still something there of the relative. But the most important message of visiting a kever is for you to walk away with feeling uplifted, remembering the person and then being inspired by the good things they have done, and remembering that the same way they made a contribution to the world in a specific way, you to try to make such a contribution. So that could be from a parent, that could be of going to Eretz Yisrael and you go to Hebron and you think about the fact that these are the people that dealt with challenge and as a result were given the land for themselves and their children. We could deal with challenges. And that is what at least I feel Kalev was doing. Kalev understood. These are challenging times. The land of Israel is going to welcome us, but we have to walk in with faith. If we don't have faith, we're going to be delayed significantly. I'm walking in here to pray, to meditate and think about these incredible people that dealt with challenge. And as a result of dealing with challenge, they merited this land. I want to be inspired by it. So that's how we can understand Kalev's visit, if indeed we go with this rabbinic reading of Vayavo at Hebron, that it is only Kalev itself. Those are the different schools. Let me make this clear. In other words, like if there was a great Hasidic rabbi in the city of Munkach. Familiar with Munkach? Mm-hmm. Munkach, Mark Lane grew up in Munkach. So the Munkach Hasidim, those are again Eastern Hungarians. Northeast, right? I have to get the geography. Close to Carpathian.
I don't remember exactly.
No, okay, but it's obviously not Bratislava. It's not Pressburg. It's close. And they were a Hasidic, a strong Hasidic. The Minchas Eluzar was the Munkach Rebbe, and the Munkach Rebbe was very interesting. He was a strong anti-Zionist actually. And Mark Lane mentioned to me that his father was like kicked out of the Beis Medrash there because he became a Zionist. Interesting stories Mark would share about the Minchas Eluzar. But the Minchas Elazar being a Hasidic writes that there are those that talk about, yes, going to graves, not going to graves. I believe that it's a mitzvah to go. So you see that there's a whole school. You have those who say mitzvah, those that say go, and then those that say go, but be careful not to pray to the deceased. And then you have a minority that believe that we just avoid going at all. So, elu ve'elu, we have a tradition that we have to respect all, because all of us have good intentions with what we are doing as it relates to it. Now, number 2. So we took care of number 1. We have a little bit of, are we more confused about going to a cemetery now? Good. That was what I was trying to achieve, and I'm happy that I got there. Now, verse 23. Vayavo, and they arrive, and now they're together. Ads, until a place called Nachal Eshkol. And remember, they spend 40 days there. On one of my, sometimes I haven't been to Israel for some time, but on trips to Israel, at the end, when you're sitting there on the plane back, it seems like one big blur. Like if someone will ask you, what were you doing Tuesday, you would say, I have no idea. Well, there was a big blur. So on some trips, I actually sat down. I remember I went 3 years ago. I went with my son Moshe. We met you there. And I sat down every single day like a good boy. And at the end of the day, I wrote like 3 sentences what we did today. So then you come back and you're able to go ahead and go through the list. So the list, if you're there for 2 weeks and you see 3 places a day, right? It's going to add up. It's going to add up to a good 40 perhaps, depends if you take a break on Friday or not. They're there 40 days. I hope they saw more than one thing a day. You would expect a list of 40 wonderful locations that they saw. What's mentioned here? Very few. Nachal Eshkol is mentioned, so it must be significant. It's not random that we choose this location and present it as a destination. They come to Nachal Eshkol. And what do they do there? So obviously, if they're going to be taking fruit from the land, they are fulfilling what Moshe Rabbeinu tells them to do. What did Moshe Rabbeinu tell them to do? V'itchazaktem. They do it, but they do it a little bit differently. Vayichretu. They take fruit from the land, but it is something that they are karat. Vayichretu. They cut it off. They cut it. And they take a zmora, nishkol, and avim. They take the vine, and they take a cluster of grapes. They put it on a pole, and then they also take some pomegranates and figs. So number 1, we want to understand why we call this place, why the location is named. Number 2, why do they change from v'itchazaktem to vayichretu, and what's its significance? And then, in addition, next verse tells us, verse 24, you should know, lamakom mahu, to that location, kara, what did they name that place? Nachal Eshkol. They named that place the Valley of Eshkol. Why? Al odot ha'eshkol, because of the cluster, asher kartu misham bnei Israel, that the children of Israel cut from there. This was so significant that it became Nachal Eshkol. You're scratching your head, like, my goodness, someone cuts a cluster off and you go ahead and name the place for what is done. There's great difficulty here. So one of the commentators, this foreigner notes, I remember that we went for a Shabbos interview to Memphis, Tennessee, and it was Parshas Shlach. So this is 14 years ago. Not so long ago, depends who I'm talking to, but 14 years ago, right? You talk to a kid, it's a long time ago. 14 years ago, was that a long time ago, Josh? It's a blink. A blink, right. So 14 years ago, so I come there, and they turned to me Friday night, and between Kabbalah and Shabbat, they wanted a short Dvar Torah. Short Dvar Torah, which sometimes is more of a challenge, the short one, believe it or not, because you have to get something across in a short amount of time before people start eyeing, because people are hungry by then, and they're eyeing the clock. You're familiar with that people do that. So now, I asked the question, right? They go ahead, lamakom mahu kara nachal eshkol. They go ahead and name the place the Valley of Eshkol because of the cluster that was taken. Makes no sense. So this morning, one of the commentators notes the following, and I explained that imagine a person lands in the airport of Memphis, and as they come into the area where you pick up your luggage, they see a statue of Elvis. And it's there, by the way, next to B.B. King, I think, but there's a statue of Elvis Presley. Now, in Memphis, it's a wonderful city. They don't have so many things happening, but they milk Elvis to the fullest, right? There is Elvis. Everything is Elvis there. So imagine you have a group of tourists that come, and they see an Elvis, and they all get very, very excited. Say, my goodness, the Elvis! And they start taking pictures and taking selfies with it, and the locals will think it's absurd. You're making a big to-do about Elvis. This is Memphis, right? Walk outside, there'll be another Elvis. By the time you get to the exit to get on to the thruway, there'll be 3 more, right? Everything is Elvis in this town. Why are you so excited? So the locals will laugh at the attitude of the visiting guests that they make a big to-do out of Elvis. Here too, for the locals, the fruit was big. Eretz Yisrael produced magnificent fruit, big fruit. These people coming in from Egypt and coming in from the wilderness, they see the gigantic, and this is the first cluster of grapes they come in contact with, and it's gigantic, it's amazing. And they were in awe, and they said, look at the size, this is incredible. This is so incredible. So they didn't take pictures, but they took it with them. Their attitude was so shocking to the locals that they made a big to-do about it, that the locals decided to call the place Nachal Eshkol, the Valley of Eshkol, Al Odot, because of the representatives of the children of Israel who went ahead and with great enthusiasm took that cluster. So that's a reading of the verse, La Makom Kara Nachal Eshkol, meaning the locals went ahead and called it Nachal Eshkol, Al Odot HaEshkol, because of the excitement and this overwhelming reaction of the tourist. Okay, that's how Sforno reads it. However, we'll take another approach would be,
but the pasuk begins Vayavo at Nachal Eshkol. It seems like it was already called Nachal Eshkol.
So it could be that the Torah is telling us that when the book is recorded, they came to Nachal Eshkol, but if you want to know why we named it, it was due to that event. So when they came, it was not yet Nachal Eshkol. That's how you have to take it if you take this Sforno's approach. On the other hand, if you take a different approach, and the approach can be clarified with the Chagavim, later on page 802, when they start talking about, this is the last verse in chapter 13, which is verse 33 on page 802, and the spies come back and they say, it's a great, nice fruit there, but my goodness, are there going to be challenges there in Israel? Because Vishamra inu et hanefilim, we saw these people that were like giants. You know the legends, they told the people of Israel, you know the legends of people falling from the sky? There were people that were so big, that were so powerful and so mighty, that there were legends about them that it is as if they fell from the sky. So they tell the people of Israel, those legends apply to the people of the land of Canaan. Forget about conquering them. You're going to see their people that are Nephilim. It is as if they fell from heaven. And they're Bnei Anak, children of giants. And you should know, Vanehi be'einenu. When we saw these giants, we viewed ourselves like Chagavim. We felt like we were grasshoppers. Not in a salad, but rather we saw ourselves as grasshoppers. That's how diminished we were in their presence. And obviously, if you are in your own eyes as a grasshopper, v'chen hayinu beinehem, that's how we were in their eyes. Now, why specifically did they choose grasshoppers? Not we were like ants, or we were perhaps like squirrels. So in Aramaic, a chagav is called a kmatzin. If you remember kamtza bar kamtza. And the word kamat, kametz, like kamtzan. What's a kamtzan? Modern Hebrew? Stingy person. A person that pinches. And the term is also used in the Bet HaMikdash when you come with a flour offering and the Kohen pinches from it. He does kmitza. You take a little bit. And what the spies were saying was that you should know. You, Moshe Rabbeinu, you told us to go ahead and come into the land of Israel, v'chazaktem, come with confidence. Take from the fruit of the land. What did Moshe Rabbeinu want? When he told them, bring back some fruit. You think Moshe Rabbeinu really wanted those grapes? No, he had a desire that these representatives of the people of Israel make Eretz Israel belong to Am Yisrael. And that will be achieved with a chazakah. You come in with confidence. This is my land. This is our land. And they should do it vit chazaktem. Take from the fruit of the land with confidence, it's yours. They go ahead and they take it, but they just cut it off. They just cut some fruit. And when they were doing it, they felt like grasshoppers, like pinching a little bit. You ever have, you have someone that is invited, a young man, right, is going for his first shidduch date, and he walks in, and he's very, very nervous, and he's presented with cakes there, and he doesn't want to touch it, and they pressure him a little bit, so he takes up some brekel, takes a little piece. That's considered like a kmitza. He's not taking it with confidence, right? 2 years later, when he's comfortable, right, and he gained already 30 pounds, then he's vitchazaktem. Then he feels that the father-in-law, then he's vitchazaktem. But in the beginning, this is the problem of the spies. They come into the land of Israel. There is no confidence, and the people of Israel, what we have to walk away with is that Eretz Israel has very significant challenges. You study the history. And if you think about the Zionist idea, right, and you think about it in 1917, 1918, it doesn't make sense. It's not a logical idea. There are people in the land there. How are you going to go ahead and convince a nation? It's not logical. But if you come in with an understanding that, the Almighty wants us to have it, and therefore come in with a chazakah. And the greatest inspiration you get is at times when you meet people in Israel that live there, and whatever attitude you have towards the shtachim, but the bottom line is that they are the most inspiring people. It's a love for the land, and there's passion, and they believe in it, and they are making a significant chazakah. When we walk in, right, when we go ahead and make a tour to Shiloh, what do we need? We need our buses that are, bulletproof. We come in there. That's our attitude, which is perhaps even logical. But if you have the chazakah, what do you mean? This is my land. This is my homeland. But I'm not going to allow others intimidate me. V'hit chazaktem ulkachtem epri haaretz. They walk in as chagavim. This is what we are told, and that is message number 2. Message number 3, because I told you, so therefore we're going to have to go ahead and do it. Things fall apart, right? Only 2 of them are. What happens? You're going to have to move. You're going to have to move forward to page 810. So what happened up until then? The Almighty tells them, listen, you have no faith. And the spies they had a responsibility of leadership to inspire the people, and they failed big time. And demoralize a nation. To demoralize a nation, now with the 6-day war, a lot of discussions. And talk about Levi Eshkol. And he addressed the nation over the radio. And he mumbled, like he was supposed to calm the nation during the time when Nasser and Hussein and others are saying that they're going to destroy Israel. And Radio Kahir is broadcasting, "Anachnu nishhat etchem." This is basically what the Jews are hearing. And throughout the world there's panic. And Israel is panicking. And they get the prime minister over the radio waves, who's supposed to go ahead and inspire them and somehow give them some courage. And Levi Eshkol mumbles. And supposedly the text of the speech was changed in the last minute, or he wasn't wearing his glasses, and he fumbles and bumbles, and the morale goes even lower due to Levi Eshkol, right? So everything seems to be going wrong. Leaders have a responsibility to inspire people, and if you were chosen to represent your tribe, you're supposed to come back and tell them, yes, there are challenges, but we have faith. This is what we are about. We are a nation of faith. We're going to be around. They don't do their mission. They are failed leaders. Who takes over that responsibility? Yehoshua in Kalev. The nation hears about it, and they are told, you're not worthy. You're not ready to make your way into Eretz Yisrael. You need to mature as a nation and forget about Eretz Yisrael. Wilderness. Let's go. Now, at that point, The nation is devastated. If you look at verse 39, the last three words, Vaitablu ha'am me'od. They mourn exceedingly. This was an overwhelming piece of news. So what happens? So in verse 40, Vayashkimu baboker, they awoke. People wake up in the morning. And a group of people, Vayalu Rosh Shahar, there are people that begin their process of entering Eretz Israel, meaning they regretted it, and they feel, now it's time to go. Let's show our faith. We're going to make our way into Eretz Israel. And in verse 40, they declare, Hinenu va'alinu el hamakom. We're going to go ahead. We are ready. We shall ascend to the place which Hashem has spoken, for we have sinned. So this is a declaration of faith, tremendous faith. We want to go. Moshe tells them, listen, right now, it's not the proper direction. Vayomer Moshe in verse 41, Lama ze'atem ovrim et pi Hashem. God said that now is not the time. You're going to be making your way in the wilderness. And why are you going to transgress the word of Hashem? It will not succeed. Vehi lo titzlach. This one will not succeed. He lo titzlach. Al talu in verse 42, it tells them, do not ascend, right? Because God is not with you. And there are some serious nations that will attack you, like the Amalekite, the Canaanite. In verse 42, they ignore. They're defiant. Vaya'apilu, the first ma'apilim. La'alosh el Rosh Hahar. And you should know that which protects them spiritually was not with them. Aaron Brit Hashem u'Moshe lo mashu. They did not leave from the camp. And as a result, unfortunately, what happened? Vayered Hamaleki v'Knani, and they struck them and they pounded them. And a very sad ending to this attempt. Now, whenever you read Chumash, whenever you read Torah, whenever you have here a Dvar Torah, something that occurred 3,500 years ago, you are inspired to live by it. You are inspired to follow it, and you view it as some kind of a system that is handed to the nation of Israel that we shall follow. Be inspired by the chesed of Avraham. Be inspired by the kindness of Rivka. That's how we view Torah. There are times that there are things that are mentioned in the Torah, and the Torah hints that you should know it is appropriate for this time, but for the future perhaps things will change. There's such a thing called Hora'at Sha'ah. It's a teaching that applies only to that period of time. So now I have to share with you briefly what Rav Tzadok HaKohen tells us. Rav Tzadok HaKohen tells us that if you read carefully at the end of verse 41, where Moshe Rabbeinu tells those people who are committed to make their way to Eretz Israel, and he said, Vehi lo titzlach, and this will not succeed. So Rav Tzadok tells us that you should know whenever we are told in Torah, Vehi, and this one will not succeed, there's an indication there that there is a time in the future where such an attitude and such behavior will succeed. There is a time in the future, and it uses a statement in the Talmud, that in the Messianic era, be'ikvata de Mashiach, chutzpah yaski, there's going to be a lot of chutzpah in the Messianic era. We're obviously there, right? There's going to be a tremendous amount of chutzpah. And chutzpah is defined by you're told no, and you want it anyway, right? Children, right? You're told no, it's not something that you deserve, but you say, I want it anyway. And Reb Tzadok says that a time is going to come, and this is what he is basically saying, that in the Messianic era, due to the fact that the text tells us that at this point, Vehi lo titzlach, at this point, in attempt to make your way without the Aaron and without Moshe, at that point it will not succeed. But in the future, there is a time, due to the fact that it's going to be an era of chutzpah, that it will succeed. And therefore, says Reb Tzadok, sheyesh zman acher, what is being hinted here, that there's going to be a time in the future when there's going to be an attempt by people who are going to be making their way into Eretz Israel, not guided by Moshe and not guided by the Aaron, but rather they're going to have this desire to make their way into Eretz Israel. And in the story we read in Parshas Shlach, it was not successful. Vehi lo titzlach. But there's a zman acher, there's a time in the future shematzliach, where it will succeed. that in an attempt to make their way that's not going to be led by rabbinic leadership and by teachings that you will hear in the study hall, there's going to be a time that it will succeed. He passed away in the year 1900, so he lived, I think, from 1840 to the year 1900. He's writing this perhaps 1870, I don't know exactly, but it is prophetic because he is talking about a time where he looks at these verses and he doesn't see it, and I have no doubt that there are those that would get up and preach, don't join the Tzionim because Vehi lo titzlach, and he says, no, you're misreading it. In other words, this time it will succeed because the text is hinting that at that point it will not succeed, or Radsha, but in the future indeed it will be successful. A magnificent teaching of Reb Tzadok, and hopefully we gain from these three insights. Thank you for listening, and a good day.